The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Del Mar TV Foundation or the City of Del Mar.
Del Mar Hot Topics, where we discuss issues that are important to you. And now your host, Richard Levesque.
Of the billions of contacts made on the internet each month, an alarming number of them could put children at risk. Predators use lies, secrecy, or stealth to get close enough to easily harm their targets. I'm your host, Richard Levesque. Stay with us as we explore the lure of the web on Hot Topics. I'd like to welcome my special guests who are going to give us some interesting but perhaps different perspectives about these social internet sites. I'd like to welcome the team perspective from Kyra Kabaric, Samantha Terry, and the community director for the iSafe program, outreach program, Jonathan King, and a child psychiatrist, adolescent psychiatrist perspective from Dr. Tom Jensen. Thank you so much for joining all of us. I've got to admit, I'm terrified of the internet. What is the lure of the internet for teenagers?
Well, the internet's a wonderful tool. The truth of the matter is you can do some amazing things online. From socializing with your friends to emailing your grandmother abroad, the truth of the matter is the internet should be used in its fullest capacity. So one of the allures of being online is that you can do it pretty much anywhere with digital convergence. I could be at home, I could be at a library, I could be at a friend's house, and instantaneously not only communicate with other people online, but also have access to this tremendous information. I think that's one of the greatest allures, particularly to kids.
It's the immediacy of it.
Exactly.
It's highly accessible, so it's easy for kids to get on the internet and be able to use the internet anywhere, really. It's easy to use and it's not that hard to get on. So
do you spend a lot of time on the internet?
I primarily use the internet more for school purposes because I find that it takes up so much time really to go on and set up these like MySpace and other programs like that, and at the end of the day I kind of want to get away from my desk, but using the internet and getting information, helpful information, is really incredibly beneficial.
And how about you, Samantha?
I do use the internet a lot. I use it for both. I mean, like, of course I'm going to get on just to like talk to my friends because that's like a different way to talk to my friends. I do also use the internet for a lot of schoolwork too. I'm on the internet a lot.
How big a punishment would it be if the internet's taken away from you for a week?
Pretty big punishment.
That would be a big punishment.
And it would be really hard to do your schoolwork too because you need it for that purpose, or I do.
So it's hard to live without it. And is it a lure psychologically, Tom?
I think it is for a number of reasons. One of them being that it's always there. And so if you're feeling lonely, if you want someone to talk to, it's there for you. It's also alluring because you can try out being whoever you want to be with your anonymous persona on the internet, or theoretically anonymous. And it's a normal part of being a teenager to try out different personalities, different likes and dislikes, and sort of figure out who you are, and the internet is another arena in which one can do that.
How common is that, Jonathan?
I would only challenge it because I don't think it's just teenagers that are doing that also, you know what I mean, in creating new avatars or new personalities online. I think that we're finding that regardless if you're online, because of the anonymity that the web offers, because I'm allowed to have access in this closed door, pretty much behind my own, in my own room, in fact, that I'm able to portray myself as someone that I'm not really, I'm not really am. So that in itself actually leads to this challenge and desire to try on like new clothes as a costume these other personalities, regardless of what age.
That's interesting. Would you say that's true? Do you ever get on on the internet and pretend to be someone else? Do other kids do that?
I don't myself. I'm very my own person. I'm really I like to be my own person. I like who I am. But I do know people who do get on and they'll be a different way on the internet. And then when you talk, just some of my friends, they'll talk to you on the internet. And then when you actually talk to them, they're kind of quiet and
they'll
more
say
content.
things that they would otherwise never say in real life, or they'll type things about themselves that possibly aren't true. So.
Wow. So the anonymity of the internet means that you can play a role and be bigger than you are, or not quite who you are. Mm-hmm. And you expect that when you're reading it.
Yeah, I'd say most of the time.
Wow. And is that a common problem? Is that something that worries you from iSafe?
No, definitely from iSafe's perspective, that's a concern. And I don't think it's atypical for students, particularly to communicate that they're of a different age, because it's typically we'll have students communicate that they're older, that they're driving cars, that they have this very glamorous lifestyle, and communicate in a way obviously to encourage and solicit other types of communication and dialogue. Because the goal pretty much online from a student perspective, unlike a parent, is that their goal is to actually communicate, to socialize. Parent typically is research-based as a tool, students to socialize. And it's integration, particularly with the cell phone, for example. I think there's a transference of technology because we're having understanding like when you're online, you're communicating again. When you're on your cell phone, you're SMSing. And now we're seeing that these two worlds collide. So when you take away from technology, you take away the internet. You're really taking away all aspects of communication.
Yeah.
And that can be quite troubling.
Yeah, my daughter would kill me if I took her cell phone away. I mean, the girls will be in the back of the car, and they're IMing to each other in the back of the car so that we don't know what they're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, does that sound familiar?
Yeah, I could definitely imagine people doing that.
You can only imagine.
Mm-hmm. Well, I could see my brother doing that.
Just your brother, that's right. You're in trouble now on TV talking about your brother. So Tom, what worries you about the anonymity of young people on the internet, in terms of predators, in terms of bullying? What worries you?
Well, one, they're not as anonymous as they think they are. People can, in fact, find you via IP addresses, via things that you let slip in your conversations, by looking at the photos that you have. Your city and state is listed, so people generally know where you're from. Secondly, people will sometimes say and do things that they wouldn't really do in real life, not understanding that cyberspace is forever. What you put out there may come back to haunt you when you apply to college or when you go for a job, and young people don't necessarily think about that.
And what about this terrifying thing for us as parents, the idea of predators, male predators out there? Is that really as scary and prevalent as the media says it is?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, we have, unfortunately, individuals always online, soliciting, 300, 400, 500 people at a time, looking at their profiles, looking at their screen names, really in an attempt to create communication and create some level of dialogue with students. So looking at your profile, and if it says Red Sox 14, there's some understanding that, yes, you might enjoy baseball, your favorite player might be 14, and actually creating this persona as someone that also enjoys baseball and the Red Sox. And I'm sorry, and that's really all it takes, so that integration and that communication to start that dialogue so that students will want to have that discourse online.
Samantha, what happened to you? You had an interesting event online. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, I was in the bathroom and I was getting ready to go to bed, and I came in my room and someone had wrote me a message, and it wasn't on MySpace, it was on MSN. And so I came in and I looked at the message, and they basically were saying that they were outside in my room, and that they knew that my hair was up and stuff, and they told me they'd been watching me for a long time. And then they asked me at one point, they're like, would you like to see my basement? And I was like, why would I want to see your basement? And they're like, because there's lots of pictures of you in there. And then they were saying very scary things, and I ended up having to call the cops. And so I called the cops, and they couldn't really do anything because they never actually said, I'm going to kill you, or they never gave a direct threat. So they couldn't really do anything, but they checked around my house and everything and made sure there's no one out there. But he gave me his number. I don't remember the officer's name, but he gave me his number, told to call back if anything else happened, and it's just really scary.
My goodness. Did you tell your parents immediately, or did you
My
wait?
sister was home with me at the time, and she's older, and she's the one who actually called the cops. I think we did try to get a hold of my mom, because my mom wasn't there, but mostly my sister made sure everything was okay.
My goodness, that's terrifying. We're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll find out what our audience is thinking and what questions they have for the panel. We'll be right back.
I live for the ocean, for its beauty and for its power. But there's definitely risks involved every time you paddle out. The same goes with the internet. It's a big ocean full of adventures, but it does have its dangers. Know the risks involved when surfing online, and learn how to protect yourself from strong currents and reefs. Check out iSafe.org to learn more about internet dangers before you take your next online adventure. Surf carefully and enjoy the ride.
Welcome back to Hot Topics. I'm your host, Richard Levac, and we're going to see what concerns and questions our audience has. Amy, you have a question.
I do. I have 3 teenage sons, and my oldest was one of the first to try out many personas on the internet. And because he was kind of a socially isolated kid, I was able to reinforce to him that, look how different you are. These other people could be somebody else. But how does a predator pick a vulnerable kid? How do they spot them?
I think in general, they look for kids who are on a lot is part of it. I think they also look for kids who sort of jump at the chance to talk with them when they make contact, who might be a little too revealing. They might look at the profile and see what information is there. But essentially what predators do is they engage a whole bunch of people online until they find one who will talk to them, who they can lock in on, and they take it from there.
Jonathan, do you have any thoughts about that?
That's absolutely true. They look at profiles and look at screen names in order to create likable interests, and that communication typically is to involve a student and to get them engaged in conversation. From that conversation, typically the grooming process starts then in creating privacy, moving from chat rooms to instant messaging, a more secure, private communication. So that the goal there is so that they can talk about issues that are just relating to them personally. From that perspective, typically it involves communicating about engaging risk. The communication is much more sensational, sexually oriented, in order, again, to gauge risk, to see if they're going to meet in person. You might have situations then occur where individuals might offer gifts or other types of enticements to actually show that the relationship is quite unique. And the goal of any predator, just so everyone knows, it's really to meet face to face. There's no other goal, to meet face to face.
Terrifying. Another question. Yes.
I'd like to ask Samantha if her usage of the internet changed after she had that negative experience.
I would say I was a little bit more, I didn't put my information out as much. I did sort of have a lot of information about me that you could find out, but I did make sure that I have a MySpace, I do, but as soon as that happened, I made sure I went through and made sure that there wasn't any personal information that anyone could find, and I made sure my profile was on private so that people who aren't my friends can look at my profile.
Any other questions or comments?
My question is, do you suppose that these predator people, these people that, want, negative things, I don't see how it has so much to do with the internet. Like, if somebody wanted to do that, like to take pictures of you or scare you like that, they could do that without the internet. I mean, say they called you and said, I can see you right now and how your hair is, and I have pictures of you. That doesn't have too much to do with the internet. If this person wants to do that, then they're going to do that anyways, I guess. And that, I think that it's like human nature to be scared of something we don't understand completely. And instead of thinking of it as a terrifying thing, we can educate ourselves about it, like the suggestions they just made, putting yourself on private, making sure you don't have that information, educating yourself about it, and don't think of it as a frightening thing, but a tool and something that should be used responsibly, and you should educate yourself about before using it.
That's a great point. Jonathan, should parents be more frightened?
I don't necessarily be more frightened. I think to just become educated of their child's online experience, to make sure that they're involved in that experience as well, and open the lines of communication involved with their own child so that they can share their technology use. And the truth point about the question, yeah, you're right. You're always going to have people in the real world that unfortunately will try to cause harm to others. The difference is that the internet is providing them a new medium, and the pervasiveness of the internet in our daily lives allows them to use tools that they didn't necessarily have in the past. So by understanding and educating oneself about how these tools can be used against you is really important, particularly since we're online all the time.
Mm-hmm. And in contrast to hanging out at the local mall, if one were a predator, you can really sort through a very large number of teenagers in a short period of time by using the technology of MySpace without really being observed. So it's a more fertile fishing ground, I think, for pedophiles, for example, than trying to meet kids in real time.
Mm-hmm. And does someone else have a question? We have a Wally?
Yes, I wonder how the teens here feel. Obviously, with technology, there are ways that increased surveillance, monitoring, screening of traffic in general could try to weed people out, but you have at stake your First Amendment rights, which is you want freedom of speech and you want to be able to communicate in privacy. And there seems like a very difficult challenge to reach this balance. And have you thought about it, and what would you recommend?
Well, like about the freedom, a lot of kids, yeah, they do want their freedom, and they do want to be able to say what they want and do what they want because, of course, we're teenagers. But like, there is other ways than the internet. Like, a lot of times, it is a lot easier to find someone on the internet than rather than just talking to them on the phone, because it's harder to get someone's phone number than to look them up on the internet. And so I think that it would be easier to communicate with your friends through just the telephone or just meeting up. But I think a lot of kids do like the internet because it's there and it's convenient and it's easy.
And it's new also, and people think MySpace is not just communicating, but people put up, pictures to share with their friends and stuff. So there are a lot of reasons that people will use the internet for that you couldn't otherwise do with a telephone or other sources of communication.
So, I mean, did it spook you enough that you got scared of using MySpace and the internet, or did you get over it pretty quickly?
I mean, I got over it pretty quickly, but it still was really scary. But I made sure, and as soon as they added me, I went through and made sure that they couldn't talk to me. I blocked them and deleted them from anything that so they couldn't get a hold of me or anything. And I mean, that's a lot easier. If someone actually called my phone, I think I would have been a little bit more freaked out if someone was calling.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments? I think we have one over there. Then we'll get you. Yes.
This is a question for Kara. The way you've been talking was my understanding that you're not on MySpace, or that you only use the internet for schoolwork and things like that. What makes you not want to use it? You're a different personality than, say, Samantha, who's enjoying it. What makes you decide not to do that?
I know that a lot of people do like to use the internet because it's fun and you can communicate quickly. But I find personally that there's just not that much time to use it, and there's so many other things that I do. And also about the predators, I know that's a threat, and I've heard a lot of horrific stories about things that have happened to girls and scary things, and I just don't want to put myself out there and possibly become a victim of that, because I know it's prevalent and it's a threat every time you go online.
Mm-hmm. I think we have one more question.
More of a comment than anything, and this is for the parents here, the teenagers here, and the parents that may watch this program, in that the internet and computers in general are a great tool for everybody to use, and they should be available. But I think that as parents, you need to monitor the kids and what they're doing and where they're going. And so I would encourage the parents not let kids have the computers in their bedrooms. That takes away from family time, it takes away from social interaction. Just like the text messaging back and forth on the cell phones, there's no real communication. It's all through the IM slang or whatever. But by isolating that child, you have, and because we've become an electronic universe, so to speak, we don't let our kids don't go out and play anymore. They don't ride the bikes. They're playing video games, or they're on the computer, on the internet. And there's kids who are 5 and 6 years old who are very educated about the internet, but they can't ride a bike.
That's a great point. We're going to take another quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to see what educators, law enforcement, and parents can do to make internet surfing really safe. Come back.
Hi, I'm Kelsey Grammer. As a parent, I'm already preparing for the day when I have that talk. No, it's not that talk. But the talk that's becoming increasingly difficult for parents today. It's the one about the dangers lurking on the internet. Bridging the digital divide is easy with iSafe America's iParent program. It's designed so you don't have to be a computer expert. You only have to care about the safety of your child. Take a stand against internet predators. Join us at iSafe.org and get the iParent program. It's free.
Welcome back to Hot Topics. Right before the break, we were talking about the lure and the dangers of internet social networking. Joining us now for the second half of our show is Candace Terry, Samantha's mom, and Laura Gunn, the Deputy District Attorney who's on the ICAT task force. Thanks for joining us. So, did you have any sense of what was happening? Were there any warning signs?
No, I usually try to keep up with Sam, and she's home a lot by herself. She's not quite old enough to get a job or anything like that. So our communication is usually after school and in between jobs. So, that's basically, I know she's on there a lot. But I ask her questions, and I kind of sit in on her chats sometimes and ask her who she's speaking with. And she's pretty honest and open with me about it.
So do you live with a little more fear and anxiety than before, or do you feel like you're safe now?
Well, it's not that I feel like I'm safe now. I think you always have a concern. I'm a single parent, so I don't have the second person to help out. So I have to kind of trust my child that she's doing good, and I think that's the main part is everybody thinks the child is naive, but the parents are naive too because they think that that's not going to happen to my child, or my child wouldn't do that. So you have to really try to learn your child, try to learn what she's about, or he.
Right, that's such good advice. Now, Laura, you're a member of the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. I mean, do we really need that? Our kids are 10 feet away in the other room in the house. Why do we need you?
Well, we absolutely need an Internet Crimes Against Children task force. The proliferation of crimes against children on the Internet has just been amazing. It's skyrocketed over the past 5 or 6 years. And what the Internet Crimes Against Children, or ICAC, task force does is it investigates crimes involving the intersection between technology, or the Internet, and children. It's kind of where child abuse meets the Internet, so to speak. And I think it speaks so well of Samantha and Candace's relationship that Samantha was able to come to her mother and tell her what had happened without fear of reprisal, because a vast majority of these crimes go unreported. Children are afraid that their computer is going to be taken away, their access is going to be taken away, or that they're going to be perceived somehow as being at fault for initiating some kind of contact with somebody who then felt free to make an inappropriate overture. And so to have a team of committed professionals who are out there protecting kids on the Internet, and there are 46 ICAC task forces all across the U.S. investigating these crimes, and they keep us very, very busy.
Oh my goodness. Just outrages me with a daughter myself. I'm a peaceful living fellow, but if somebody did that to my daughter, I'd be so mad. Any comments, Jonathan?
Yeah, actually, we have the luxury at iSafe to be working with ICAC. ICAC's lecture across the country. And what's interesting is that when we look to see what parents and students are doing online, 93% of parents believe they've established rules within the home. But if you take the same students from those parents, only 37% of students actually say their parents actually apply rules. So it's an interesting dichotomy because you have such an interesting maturation from a student perspective about using online use, and then the dichotomy is that it doesn't exist from the parent perspective. So in understanding what parents are doing, and understanding what students are doing, and the convergence, that is them talking to one another, is so imperative in the home.
So is there a digital divide? I wasn't allowed to watch the Rolling Stones by my grandmother. Now, she didn't know anything about rock music. I don't know much about the internet. Are we seeing a digital divide between parents and children?
I think there's an enormous digital divide, and not just in terms of skills. I mean, you know, this generation has grown up with the internet, and they're very comfortable with it. And to some extent, the real world and the virtual world are almost seamless for them. Their social world online is sort of an extension of their social world generally. Adults, some of the parents don't even use email or use the internet minimally, and even most adults who use it go out looking for specific information, or they order something online, but they really don't have the same view of cyberspace that their teens have, and generally are not sophisticated enough to know what teens are up to.
Tell us about grooming. We've heard about grooming. What is it?
Grooming is something that a predator, whether it's an online predator or somebody that a child knows face-to-face, it's kind of prepping. It's building a relationship of trust between yourself and your child. And one of the panelists earlier was speaking to the fact that predators tend to target more socially isolated children. And they've actually talked to predators who are serving time in state prison for child molest and done studies on how, and this is pre-internet studies, how did those predators select their victims. And the inmates that were willing to talk to them said, you look for the kid who's off by themselves, who doesn't have a lot of other kids around him, who seems like a quiet child, not a loudmouth, somebody introverted who's craving a lot of attention.
And how do you find that kind of child on the internet? How do you know that someone's isolated on the internet?
Well, I think that our child psychiatrist spoke to that a little bit before, in looking for a child who's online a great deal, who seems very eager to share details, lonely, maybe talks about problems at home. And this is where a sophisticated predator can really step in, because if a child's willing to, gosh, my home life is really rotten right now, my sister's getting all the attention, my mom's gone all the time, blah, 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 and maybe, sharing their frustrations, somebody who's good with kids, and many of these people pick kids because they don't relate all that well to adults. This is a great opportunity for somebody like that to step in and say, I really sympathize, that must be really hard for you. It's too bad you don't live out here on the beach with me in California, because if you did, we'd surf every day and I'm always around, and make it sound really kind of golden and glowing at the other end of the keyboard. And this is where kids can get sucked into a fantasy that is very, very far from the truth.
Amazing. And Tom, what kind of kids are most vulnerable in your practice? I mean, what do you see? Is there a particular profile or a particular home life?
I think I see two kinds of kids. One are what we already described, kids who perhaps don't have a lot of friends in real time, don't feel particularly close to other people but crave that, may not have a father figure or a mother figure that they can really relate to, and they're out there seeking that ideal, that fantasy figure that they want to exist in their life. And a good predator knows how to become that person by listening to what the child puts out on the internet. I think a second group, though, would be kids who are really seeking excitement. They're bored, and so they'll go out and maybe take on outlandish profiles and the like, just sort of for excitement, and then it gets out of hand.
Candace, Samantha didn't seem like either of those two kids. What happened?
Well, you're right, she isn't. She's very unique. But I also have an older daughter who, in my perspective, I would have been, if it had been her, I would have been worried about her, because they're two different personalities. So I see it because I have such a variety of children that I can see that I would be concerned with one, but yet not the other. And it's their personality. Still, I try to have the same type of relationship with each, but each child is different, just like he said.
And Samantha didn't rise to the bait.
No.
She called the police and told you. I mean, that same person might have sent the message to 1,000 kids looking for the one that engaged with them. And the internet gives them the luxury of doing that, different from the shopping mall where they have to approach people individually.
Yes. So any advice to parents, Candace?
Like I said, just don't be naive about them. They're not going to tell you everything about themselves, and some things you might not want to know, but just keep open communication and make sure you know who they're with and where they're going, and stay in contact with their friends and know who they're with.
That's great.
And I can only support that as well. You know, working with millions of students, we provide resources actually to parents. They can go to our website, iSafe.org, and actually receive information about cyber predators, cyberbullying, intellectual property, so they become educated and actually understand how to avoid those risks in the home. But you hit the head on the hammer. The truth of the matter is open line of communication in the home.
So we've talked a lot about sexual predators. What about bullying? How big a deal is that? That's not a crime, right?
It depends on the level to which the bullying rises. One person asked a question before about a situation that didn't quite rise to the level of a criminal case or brought something up like that. In California, it's definitely a threat, or making a threat of death or great bodily harm is a crime. It's a felony, and stalking is also a felony. But short of that, there's this tremendous gray area where you get into California case law, and some of those lines are possibly not so clear. Sometimes the identity of the bullier is not so clear. If you have one computer that's accessible by several children, children have access to computers not just in their homes, although their brothers and sisters may all have access to their same computer, but in libraries, at school, at their friends' homes, you can have 5 or 6 kids clustered around one computer, and sometimes it's hard to tell who did what.
Right, and you can get groupthink. Well, let's take another break, and we'll come back and see what our audience is thinking and ask some questions of the panel. We'll be right back.
Did you clean up the room?
Of course.
Hi, I'm Olympic gold medalist Al Jordan, and this is my daughter Mary. iSafe America is a foundation dedicated to keeping students safe on the internet through education and empowerment.
Take control of your internet experience and keep your friends safer online by becoming an iSafe student mentor.
Find out how you can be a gold medal parent
or an iSafe student mentor at www.isafe.org.
Welcome back to Hot Topics. We're talking about the internet, the lure, the dangers. Let's get some audience questions or comments.
As parents, how can we be more vigilant, or are there telltale signs that can tell us that something's gone awry? I mean, you get this false sense of security that your kids are at home on a computer, they should be safe, and everything is hunky-dory. But some people are not as computer savvy as others. Is there any telltale signs, or how, as a parent, can we try to stay on top of some of these social networks?
That's a great question.
I hear kind of two questions there. One is, what are the warning signs? And two is, what can we do? With respect to the warning signs, some children are, this is their whole life. I mean, there are kids who go home from school, get online, and never get off until midnight, and they're hard to wake up in the morning, and they're losing sleep, and their schoolwork is suffering. That's definitely a big red flag. If you notice that people are trying to communicate with your child offline, phone calls, sending gifts, getting mail from people who you don't know about or who these people are, I mean, the same as you would want to know who your child's friends are offline, find out who your child's online friends are too. One thing that I always tell parents is, it's very, very common to hear a parent say, this is frankly a little intimidating for me. My son or my daughter is, and they brag on their kids and they say, well, she's the techie one. She set up our TV. She set up our computer. She's the administrator on our computer, whatever. But I really believe, and this is something that I really emphasize with parents who I speak to in the community, you have to get educated. You have to get educated, and if you don't know, there are so many books and websites out there, you know, Computers for Dummies, Chat Rooms for Dummies, or most of us have a friend or two who we know is really techie or really tech savvy. Grab that person and say, you know what, I need your help. Most people are more than willing to help you, and there are online resources and websites. You know, if you know how to use Google, just type in internet safety and you'll get all kinds of ideas and tips on how to look out for your child a little better.
Great. Tom, any psychological telltale signs?
I guess the other thing I would add to that is when kids start to get in over their head, they may spend even more time on the internet, or you may find that they're more emotionally labile or upset, more irritable, that sort of thing. Although again, for a parent, that's sort of difficult to detect. Often their teenagers are irritable and upset with them all the time.
So communication, education. Jonathan?
Yeah, I can only echo exactly what's been said here. And humorously enough, you know, I get a great opportunity actually to travel across the United States working with students. And some interesting things that have just risen recently is we have students now installing applications, obviously to get online, and they're installing parental controls for their own parents. So they're actually viewing the web through the eyes of what was to be hopeful of anti-porn, anti-spam, and actually installing the full version for themselves, knowing that they think they can navigate effectively online, but also not wanting their parents to take away the technology again.
Amazing.
So it's a very they have such an amazing understanding of technology. So it didn't surprise me, but again, it goes back to education, communication.
Well, can I just build on that? Two more things that I remembered as possible warning flags would be the use of multiple screen names. One thing that a child having multiple screen names might be is to bypass your filtering software. So if the filtering software is set up not to let, you know, screen name Johnny 12 get anywhere, all a kid has to do is invent a new screen name. Another thing is that sometimes online predators who are grooming a child will give them a different screen name to use when they're communicating with that person, and that also will bypass the software and maybe make it harder for a parent to detect that something is going on.
Terrifying. Amy, you have a question.
Well, we had an interesting experience. My niece had a MySpace area, and someone impersonated her and built a second MySpace area using her picture and everything, and actually solicited photographs from her friends, putting it out there saying, I lost all my photos, can you send them to me? And it was a stalker. Is that on the increase?
I've seen that, yes. We've actually seen things like that for 2 or 3 years now. I mean, it's very common, and what's scary is that it could have escalated into something far more sinister, where you basically, it's kind of an odd form of identity theft, really, where instead of just saying, send me photos, you can say, here, you know, if the person knows you, here's my address, here's the kinds of things I'm into, and start, you know, building up a very wild and false persona using pictures of a kid who may or may not run into people who recognize them at Starbucks down the street.
Oh, that's terrifying. I just want to run away to the mountains. So anybody else with any questions or comments? Yes.
Mrs. Gunn, I know you belong to a special task force that helps kids to monitor kids on the internet, but what are some of the specific programs that you have to help integrate parents and kids to learn this lesson? Like, do you have guest speakers that go to school lecture halls and tell students and parents about this stuff?
Yes, everybody on our ICAC task force goes out to schools. I've talked to a lot of PTA groups myself. A lot of our detectives will talk to parents, and they'll also talk to kids. You know, at every level. You know, from elementary school on up to high school. And you know, we find that actual police officers are a little better in talking to kids directly because kids kind of understand a police officer a little more than a district attorney. But you know, there are some true horror stories out there, and it really is, I think, an important part of our mission to talk to kids and make them understand that, because a lot of the time, if they're hearing it from you, the parent, they're gonna blow it off. Whereas if they hear it from somebody who's actually in law enforcement and seeing it on a daily basis, they may give it a little more credibility.
Any other questions or thoughts? Yes.
At what level does, as a parent, if you think something's going on, do you just call the police? Do you call your task force? And I guess, at what level what do you guys do about it? Do you track people down, or you just tell us to change our accounts, or?
I can't tell you it's secret, no. It really is on kind of a case-by-case basis, depending on what you're dealing with. You know, obviously one thing that we really try to emphasize with parents is if your child gets something really scary, like Samantha did over the internet, it's really important for parents to remember that it's not the child's fault. You know, she didn't do anything to cause that. She's a teenager. You know, this person, whoever they are, that person is the adult. And so we really try to, you know, get that into parents' minds, because that opens up the dialogue a little better, and it maybe will make your child a little more willing to tell you. And we just, you know, have done polls and talked to kids in schools and ask questions, and it's such an unreported crime. You know, kids don't want to tell you, and they definitely don't want to tell us. And so until those lines of communication are open, you know, they're not going to say anything, and you and I are never going to hear about it. Once we do hear about it, again, it's really on a case-by-case basis. If it's something that is personally frightening to you, then yes, call the police. We tell people, don't delete anything, don't unplug the computer, don't really, really resist the urge to write back. You may be tempted to write back, don't write back, leave that for the police. And there's something that the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has set up called the Cyber Tip Line. And it's an online reporting form where you can report information online about a crime or a suspected crime. And the National Center is located in Alexandria, Virginia. And there are people who monitor that cyber tip line constantly, and they get it, they investigate it, and they figure out which ICAC task force to send it to for further investigation. So you can report it to your local police, and you can also report it online.
You know, this might be a good spot for us to take a quick break, come back and talk a little bit more about what else we can do to give our kids a great experience on the internet, but to protect them. We'll be right back.
There's just so much out there to do. It's a good place to catch up with friends. We like to check out new sites all the time. There's no way they're going to stop us. Yeah, I know there's a risk, but I always make sure my friends and I protect ourselves. I'm Willie Santos, and I just want to say play safe online with iSafe. Peace.
Joining our distinguished panel of Jonathan King, Dr. Tom Jensen, Laura Gunn, is Sheriff Jim Blanco. Welcome.
Welcome. Glad to be here.
Sheriff, what do you do?
I'm investigative sergeant, working for the Sheriff's Department, currently assigned to the CATCH team. Everybody's got to have a moniker. CATCH team stands for Computer and Technology Crime High-Tech Response Team. Our goal is that we're part of a state-funded task force that encompasses Riverside, Imperial, and San Diego counties. And our responsibility is investigation of all computer crime except for child pornography. We get into cyber stalking, cyber bullying, internet fraud, hacking intrusion cases, the gamut.
So it's both children and adults?
Yes.
And you've been listening to our talk, are you concerned about what's happening as far as kids are concerned?
Yes, kids and adults. I think that the kids, because of the technology, they've grown up with technology, whereas in our generation, technology was just coming on the forefront. So they're more tuned to a lot of things. Schools are integrated with computers and technology. Kids at 5, 6 years old have cell phones. And as parents, we need to keep that thing. And as far as law enforcement goes, that's a battle for us because a lot of the parents are behind the times. The kids are more technology savvy. in so many different avenues. Some of our cases for hack and intrusion involve kids who've are teenagers. We've had a recent high school graduate last year that was able to intrude into San Diego State's computer systems. I put all his music there, downloaded movies on there, opened it up to thousands of other people, and he was 17 years old. He was moving on to Harvard University. But again, he thought it was a free game just to play on the internet, just to go out there and play, and the parents had no clue what he was doing.
Amazing. Now we're going to take questions in this last segment as we go. We had a question over there.
Yeah, I'm one of those ignorant parents. My children have actually grown up, but I'd like to know, what is MySpace? I haven't really quite understood, other than it's on the internet. I haven't heard anyone really describe what it is, and so my curiosity is, what is MySpace and what are some of those internet sites that you're talking about? Because it's kind of foreign language to me.
No,
that just shows you, doesn't it, how behind we are as parents.
MySpace was, and I don't know the person's name right off the top of my head, but everybody's on the internet has found a niche. It's Tom, but I don't know his last name. But Tom and a group of friends of his have devoted a large thought. How can we communicate? We have chat rooms, we have instant messaging, but we wanted everybody to have their personal web space. So what they did is they created a place called MySpace, and you can go out there and create your own personal website. They provide the tools. You can design it, put pictures up there, write comments back and forth, bulletins, email messages, and you don't have to pay for a thing. It's all paid through advertising. And what people don't know is that Fox News Corporation owns the biggest advertisers on MySpace. So basically, Robert Murdoch of Fox News Corporation essentially owns MySpace, where everybody visits, everybody communicates back and forth.
Wow. This isn't then just teenagers, this is you and I as well. It's for everybody.
Adults.
I thought this was just about teenagers.
Oh no, it's adults also. A lot of adults, we talked about pedophiles in the chat rooms, but a lot of adults have gone onto MySpace. And some of the college kids have even said, hey, we don't like MySpace anymore. Well, let's start a new group called Facebook.
Yeah.
And then there's, you have the cell phones and everything else that's moving on from there.
So is MySpace passé for the avant-garde teenager?
I definitely get a sense from the kids that I go out and talk to that for a lot of them, as soon as all the media furor started over MySpace, it instantly became kind of passé, and a lot of kids, I think, have moved on. I mean, to kind of build on what Jim said, MySpace has some things in it that, and other social networking sites are very similar, where you can go on and set up your own website, and the idea is that you're supposed to be 14, and the way that they check is they ask you up front how old you are, and if you say that you're not 14, you don't get to go on. Well, that's not much of a safeguard. We have heard of, I personally know a 13-year-old who goes on with the full permission of her parents. I've heard of 8-year-olds going on who has a 12-year-old who can upload pictures for her. 2 criminal defendants on my caseload have MySpace pages. So it really is just for everybody. And I heard an amazing statistic. About 2/3 of kids today in the U.S. who are between 13 and 17 years old have a web space of their own, either on MySpace, Zanga, Facebook, one of those. So 2/3 of teenagers today, high school age teens, have a MySpace page or a similar kind of page, which is a pretty amazing statistic.
Amazing. Now we have a question or a comment from our teen population.
What's the average time for a predator to make face-to-face contact with a child?
That's a good question.
That is a good question.
I think it varies. It varies a lot on how lonely the child is, what the predator is seeking. Sometimes it can be almost instantaneous. And instantaneous, I mean like within a week or 2 weeks, to maybe it takes a little bit longer. They groom a little bit longer, maybe a month or 2 months. So it all depends on what this person is out there to seek, and how naive the child is, and how the younger the child. It's like the old thing when our parents told us, well, don't talk to strangers in the playground. Well, then all of a sudden he brings a puppy up there, and oh my gosh, there's a puppy, so you run into the puppy. So whatever that person's offering on the other side, and how lonely, where the parents are or aren't, you know, in the relationship with their
How
child.
protected the child is.
Yes.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Do we have another question? Yes.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about the real world and how the internet, you know, is separate from that. And I was just wondering what you guys think about, you know, the separation of the internet and the real world, and how, you know, we just said 2/3 of all teenagers have their own web space. It's obviously not, you know, separate from the rest of their life, even though they're, you know, home on their computer, even because it's accessible, the internet's accessible from everywhere, and, you know, it's not a separate space. Do you think that, you know, that sort of thinking, separating it out from everything else, sort of polarizes us even more?
That's a good question. Tom, what do you think?
Well, I think it's an excellent point, and it's part of what I alluded to in the earlier segment about the difference in view of an older generation versus a younger generation of the internet. And I think for your generation, it isn't separated. It's all a part of the same thing, and cyber interactions are very much woven into your real life interactions, and it's quite different. Whereas for your parents, the internet is this foreign thing, probably, that they use to order things from and look up the news and this type of thing. And so it's very, very different between the two generations.
Yeah, we're finding it too also that we're seeing less polarity and actually more contextualization. You know, if you actually go online or have a cell phone in Japan or China, now your transactions are tied to your cell phone. You can go to a vending machine and actually make a purchase via your cell phone. So we're seeing your banking tied with your social network, tied to your cell phone, tied to your communication, to your email, to your SMS. So you're walking around constantly in this online world.
Yeah. The one thing about the internet is communication, you know, even cell phones, communication has become instantaneous. I can reach out and touch somebody in Eastern Europe within a matter of seconds or less.
Or Jordan.
And when I was growing up, you had pen pals. Well, how long did it take the pen pal for him to reach the letter back and forth? And you know, here are emails, like instantaneous back and forth. So there's that kind of communication.
And that creates a more intense bond if it's instantaneous to the predator, to the stalker.
Absolutely, and it also allows the predator to groom a little bit more effectively, because in real time they can have these interactions, and the child may say what they're feeling, and they can respond empathically and go back and forth in a way that you couldn't do through other media.
Right, pen pal. We have another question.
I just have a comment. I just want to reiterate on a topic you had brought up earlier, the two gentlemen earlier, about kids going on there and not portraying themselves to be other people who they're not. I think things like that could come back and haunt you, not only by employers or if you're applying for school or applying for a job, but I think criminally, I know personally of cases that has happened where that can come back to bite you by not being honest or portraying someone that you're not on these social networks.
Those are wise words of advice. What about privacy, though? I mean, how do we get that balance between respecting our kids' space, not invading it, not hovering, and being safe?
And, you know, Scott McNeely from Sun Microsystems, I think, said it best when he said, internet privacy, what internet privacy? There is no internet privacy. And at least the parents I work with, I suggest that they tell their kids, look, if you want to have a private conversation, do it on the phone, do it face-to-face, but what you do on the internet is absolutely not private. And also what you communicate on the internet is potentially forever. It doesn't just go away when you log off.
But some parents are intrinsically hovering kinds of parents. Other parents don't want to invade their kids' privacy and make their kids feel that there's no trust. Any quick words about that balance?
I think you have to look at that house is your house. You're bringing your kids up. You have to bring them up with a good set of values and morals. And that values and morals starts, you know, basically at birth. This is where we want to go. You know, there's this honesty. I'm in charge here. We're parents. We'll give you your freedom to grow. You know, because obviously the kids are going to try and test those freedoms. But when it comes to the internet, computers, You have to have that control. You have to be able to say, you're on it now, or use software or filtering software, key logging software to find out where they're going, especially if they're being evasive about their behaviors. And
Okay, especially if they're evasive.
Yes. So each kid's different, so you have to deal with that. But you need to be. You're the parent. You got to stay in control.
Because yeah, the ramifications are just so different. I mean, it's unfortunately the internet allows perpetuity. So you will have counselors that will look at those spaces and make decisions about whether your child actually is accepted to a university. You have Fortune 500 companies making decisions on employment based on their online site. So again, the ramifications are more enormous, I think, in the online world actually than the real world.
I think we have one more quick question or comment.
I'm aware that Craigslist has some monitoring of its website for what people post and whatever. Does MySpace and other these types of websites, do they monitor and what sort of responsibility or the degree of responsibility do they take on monitoring these websites?
MySpace they do monitor their all the spaces, and they do have a set of rules that tells you no sex stuff, no violence, but that doesn't mean that people don't find a way to bypass it. Gangbangers, that we use, street gangs, they're using the MySpace, setting it private, and they putting information back on there because they can talk in gibberish or internet speak or whatever. People don't know what they're saying back and forth, and they're out there bragging about their escapades, what they're doing. So even though MySpace, there's millions of people on MySpace, so even though they say we can control this or we do this, we monitor the age limit of what person goes on there, we don't know.
Great point, Jim. We'll be right back after a quick break.
Hi, I'm George Stoltz. I play a cop on Seventh Heaven. Go to www.isafe.org. It's safe, it's fun, it's iSafe.
I'd like to thank the audience and our distinguished panel for helping us to understand both the benefits and the dangers of this wonderful tool, the internet. It's important we reconnect with our kids by discovering old habits, like talking around the dinner table. Learning about who they are and asking about what they're discovering not only helps us protect them, it also helps us learn more about the wonders of this digital age and may help close the digital divide. Thanks for watching Hot Topics.